Hey guys, Dave Kettler here with Market Misbehavior. Today we're going to update one of the charts we shared last week of the top 3 charts to watch for a top in technology. It triggered a sell signal today. I'll show you the chart and what it means for the Nasdaq. So last week on this channel I did a video called 3 charts to signal a top in technology, and I had to share with you an update that in the last couple days, one of those charts has flashed a major league sell signal. It's using what's called the bullish percent index, which is a breadth indicator, a market breadth indicator based on point and figure charts. Point and figure charts are a classic technique, really started and flourished in the pits in Chicago, the CME, the SIBO, and now it's proliferated really worldwide. And people use it on all sorts of different things. But one of the cool things we can do on the StockCharts platform is turn point and figure charts into a breadth indicator, because at any point, a point and figure chart is either bullish or bearish based on the most recent signal that it's generated. We can calculate how many stocks in a particular list are showing a bullish signal, and that becomes the bullish percent index. Similar to how we'd look at the McClellan oscillator, some other measure of advancers, decliners, or percent of stocks above the key moving average. This is another way to measure participation and the strength of the trend. The Nasdaq's bullish percent index has been incredibly strong, overbought over the 70 level, and just this week has reversed back below. We're going to look at that chart and see what previous signals similar to this have led to in terms of drawdowns for the Nasdaq 100. We'll also look at the chart of the NDX on its own, using some other indicators as well to see what sort of picture we can paint about the potential next steps for the Nasdaq. Before we get to that chart, by the way, if you like this sort of thinking about technical analysis, market psychology, behavioral finance, trend, momentum, sentiment, breadth, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Also, give the video a like if you appreciate it. We would very much appreciate that back. Put a comment below. Do you think the next 10% move in the Nasdaq 100, the NDX, is higher or lower, and why? Let me know in the comments. Now, we were looking at my chart of the Nasdaq 100 bullish percent index. If you use the StockCharts platform, the ticker is $BP for bullish percent, NDX for Nasdaq 100. Now, I like to look at these this sort of chart with the indicator on the top half and the underlying security on the bottom half. So I'm actually looking at the NDX on the top. I'm looking at the Nasdaq composite just to sort of look at a broader universe, but you could easily do the NDX on the bottom and have a similar sense of the relationship. The relationship is very similar between the two. But since we've been talking so much about the leadership and mega cap growth, I think it's keenly important, or I'm keenly aware of how strong this basket of stocks is, because I think the moment the Nasdaq leadership shows weakness, that's where our major benchmarks, which are so tilted toward those FANG sectors and mega cap stocks, they can really start to struggle. So you can see here the indicator fluctuates from 0 to 100, rarely gets down to 0 up to 100, because that would have to mean pretty much everything is going one way or the other. There's always some outliers doing something different. So even at its peak, it rarely gets above 90, and even at the worst point, it rarely gets much below 10. Worth noting, those extremes are pretty important, though. Notice when we get up toward above 85%, below 10-15%, those usually end up being some significant turning points to be aware of. But I've highlighted in red every time over the last 12 months this indicator has gone, actually I'm going back a little further to the end of 2021. Every time this indicator has gone above 70 and then dipped back below. So what that basically means is you initiate the signal by over 70% of the Nasdaq 100 members. So literally at least 70 out of the 100 are in a bullish point figure chart. Then some of them start to rotate lower. Some of them start to falter from their bullish phase. That generates some sell signals, and that's when the indicator goes back below 70. The reason why I think this is such a powerful indicator is if you know point and figure charting, it really has to reverse quite a bit to generate a sell signal. It's not just a brief pullback. It has to be a big rotation lower. So when these indicators go above 70%, then change, that means that something is happening underneath the hood with some of these key leadership stocks. Now, if you look back, at best, right, the best outcome has been a brief pullback, and probably the November of 2022 probably gives you the most mild example, because we had a couple times during this bottoming phase where we went above 70% just briefly and then dipped back down. This ended up being a brief pullback, we'll call it 5% or so, and then this one essentially flat, really didn't go down much during that period. So those were pretty mild pullbacks, and that is certainly a possibility. But look at the average pullback, and you'll see it's actually quite significant. And not just during the bearish phase of 2022. Look so far in 2023. The last time this has happened was in early February. That ended up being a pretty big swing from 12,250 down to around 11,000 on the Nasdaq Composite. Now, fair enough, we regained those highs and then broke out. But that meant we had a significant drawdown. I think that is most likely this scenario that we're looking at here, because these stocks have had such a run, because they're so overvalued, because they're so overextended based on any technical metric. It is reasonable to expect some sort of pullback, and that's sort of our base case for the Nasdaq Composite June into July. But this signal is the first one really indicating a confirmed rotation lower, overheated breadth that's now coming back to normal. So what does this actually mean for the prospects for the Nasdaq going forward? Now we're looking at the Nasdaq 100 index for the last 2 years. I just want to focus in on 2023, and I'm looking at the price here on top, and it's a little busy, so I'll explain what each of these represents. We have the Nasdaq 100 for the last 2 years. We're looking at the 50 and 200-day moving averages in blue and in red, respectively. These blue horizontal lines represent a Fibonacci framework, or Fibonacci analysis, using the January 2023 low and the June 2023 high so far. Again, we may make a new high here in this week, I don't know. But if this ends up being the high that we established at the end of last week, beginning of this week, that's where the top of that framework would be. Below here, we have a trend line, a purple trend line, which I'll come back to in a second. Then we have the MACD indicator. I'm actually using the PPO, which is very similar, just calculated a little bit differently, but overall almost identical signals to the MACD indicator. It stands for the percent price oscillator. Then at the bottom, the RSI, which is my favorite measure of price momentum. So we can see immediately that the price has been overbought. That lines up with the bullish percent index being overextended as well. Now I have this little zoom thumbnail so you can see the most recent data in a little more clearly. The reason why I want to do this is because I want to highlight this. While the bullish percent index has given a sell signal this week, you're also getting a potential sell signal from the MACD indicator, from the PPO indicator. That signal happens when the MACD line or the PPO line crosses down through the red signal line. It's sort of toying around with it, sort of pretzeling around the same levels here over the last day or two, but overall certainly appears to be a sell signal. Look back at these previous sell signals. You'll see it happened at the February peak, at the August peak, at the April peak of last year, and in November of 2021. Those are the last 4 times we had a big run, became overextended, and then rotated lower. The April peak as well, I meant to mention there as well. So usually pretty significant when we have a run higher in the PPO indicator, and then we get a sell signal, which is potentially happening right now this week. So let's assume for a moment that the price rotates lower. What's next? Here's the brilliant thing, or here's the really exciting or I guess encouraging sign about these growth areas of the market. They've had such a run that they can pull back quite a bit and still be within any definition of a bullish phase. Things I would tend to look for during a pullback. Can it hold the 50-day moving average? Currently, the 50-day moving average for the Nasdaq 100 is down around 13,800, which means we could go down another 1,000 points and still have room before we hit the 50-day moving average. The 38.2% retracement level of the way back to the January 23 low is currently just above 13,500, just a little bit below those current levels. A trend line taking the January low and the March low, the 2 most significant lows so far in 2023, gives us a downside objective of around 13,700, 13,800 or so, depending. Again, this depends obviously on how quickly we'd sell off. If we'd sell off very quickly, it would be down here. If we take our time, it would be up in the 14,000 range, even higher. What's interesting to me is all 3 of these are kind of coalescing around a similar range. Currently, it looks like it'll be around 13,500 to around 13,800 or so, depending on how quickly we come down, which means you have downside risk to that level. The price could come back to that level on the Nasdaq 100. That would actually confirm all of these things. The overbought conditions would be alleviated. The PPO indicator would be confirmed. We could pull back quite a bit and then reset for an incredible run going into year end. That is a very potential scenario. I mean, it's certainly a likely scenario. I would say the fact that we've had all these overbought conditions, we're now getting the sell signals from market breadth and from the PPO indicator, the RSI, coming out of the overbought conditions. That tells me we have room to hit some of those short-term pullback objectives and still be within the context of a larger uptrend. What do you think? And actually, let me put on one more thing, because the question I'm going to ask you is, What's the likelihood? Do you think 10% move, the next 10% move higher or lower? Just so you know, a 10% move below current levels, call it 15,000 right now. 10% move would take us basically right to that objective, take us to that first Fibonacci level around 13,500. A 10% move higher from 15,000 would take us up to around, we'll call it 16,500. So which level do you think gets hit first? 13,500, a 10% move down, or 16,500, a 10% move higher? Leave a comment below. Let me know which you think is more likely first and why. For Market Misbehavior, I'm Dave Keller. Have a good one. We'll see you again soon.